All right, so one of the really big topic that's been on so many minds lately, if not for a long time, is public safety. Um, I've wondered for all the candidates, if you were the city council member now for this area, and what keeps happening, we've had more murders than ever in this area as well as citywide. We've had other kinds of crimes. What do you say to people? What do you do? What do you say you're going to do?
That is absolutely top of mind for myself, for voters that I'm talking to at the doors, and it is something that we really need to get a handle on as a city. I think what we need to make sure that we're doing is looking at evidence-based solutions as much as we can. We need to like stay firm that we are going to approach this in a continued pragmatic, sensible, evidence-based way, and do the things that we can get the most bang for our buck, as far as solutions. And so those things would be, number one, we need to rebuild the force. We know we need more officers. We lost officers in 2020, obviously, and now it's time to rebuild. It's past time to rebuild. We're doing everything that we can. I wouldn't say we're doing everything we can. We're doing a lot. We have the $30,000 bonuses out to hire more officers. That hasn't been working that well. You can hear that from officers themselves saying that's not the problem. We need to look at what it's going to take for this sort of younger generation to sign up for these jobs. How can Seattle be the best city in the nation to attract officers? Is that supporting? Definitely need to support the officers we have, and we need to find out, is it morale, is it safety, is it connection to community? What will bring people in? We don't want to lower our standards. We know that the 5 officers that were responsible for Tyree Nichols' death were brought in at a time when Memphis had dropped their standards, so we can get in big trouble by doing that. But we need to just do everything we can to bring more officers in. So that's number one. Number two, since we know it's going to take time to rebuild the force, I think we're netting 15 per year with everything we're doing so far, and hopefully we can do more, but it's going to be slow. So we can't stop at a public safety plan that says hire more officers, because that would just be an insufficient plan, and we would be putting public safety on hold for the number of potentially decades that it's going to take to rebuild the force. And this is true in the nation. Nobody's hiring police. The armed services are having trouble hiring. It seems kind of generational to me. So we need to dig deeper than just saying it's a specific Seattle problem, because that also won't get us there. So, but now we know that we need to. Now is the time then to use every other method and lever we can to rebuild public safety in our city and our neighborhoods. And we have lots of evidence-based ways to do that. There are several cities that have put things in place, and they're far ahead of us. We are kind of paying the price of having sort of relied on one tool in our tool belt for as long as we have. Now's the time to stand up those alternative response. That's a widely popular solution with voters. It's also highly evidence-based. So however we do that, we need to make sure that we can have, and I could see it being in sort of tiers. You might have, officer-led only, where we know it's a very violent situation and we need an officer with a gun. You could have officer-led civilian-backed, where we want to make sure that, there may be danger of having a civilian lead, and so we need to have the officer in the lead. Then we could have civilian-led officer-backed, where we think we can probably handle this with a civilian responder, but we want to make sure we have protection as needed. And then civilian-only led, and wherever we can, we're sending civilian or first responder. Firefighters have already been doing a great job at this. They are unarmed, and they are handling a lot of the 911 calls. And so there's a large chunk of that where we can, if we invest there and make sure that we have that, all those alternative responses set up, we will have higher public safety. We also need to go into communities where we know that, I mean, I think, we've seen homicide rates being up. I think we need to dig a little deeper and find out, are these homicides, are they gun, or are they, drug cartel related? Are they gang related? That might help us a bit decide how we solve that. But we also know that guns are involved, and we have to do everything we can to reduce guns in our communities, and we have to reach out and provide gun training. Keeping your guns locked up. Making sure that, and obviously guns are available on the black market. And so a lot of times what we do to put laws in place to make sure gun ownership and gun purchasing are very well controlled, we still have to deal with the black market gun, supply. And so reaching out to the communities where gun violence is happening or occurring will help. And then youth programs. Getting our youth into safe situations where they understand, number one, what gun violence is doing to our communities and their communities, providing education, making sure that kids have places to go and things to do. I would love to see, I don't know if it's possible, but like a sports complex in District 1 somewhere with, basketball courts and volleyball courts and tennis courts and, just give our kids some place to go and something to do. And the other thing that I think would be really important is to start teaching the trades more in schools. We have seen a couple programs that have been really successful. Get the trades into schools. We need workers, good union jobs. We have a ton of work that needs to be done. And if we get kids a living wage right out of high school, we're going to see a lot fewer kids turning to, the wrong path.
So, one thing that you mentioned about obviously the alternative responses, in addition to hiring more police, because you're right, we can't just go out and say, with the money exists, the funding is there for hiring police. If that was just an issue of funding or something, they'd be hired by now.
Mm-hmm.
But so the current council has talked a lot also about alternative responses, and I believe has even funded some of them, but they haven't really manifested. So what can we do? What should we do when there's going to be some new council members coming in, potentially including yourself? What's going to be different?
Yeah, well, we need to make sure all of our elected officials are on board and behind making sure this evidence-based solution gets the funding that it needs. So we've already seen programs like, the LEAD program, which is more around homelessness, but we know that also bringing people in off the streets can reduce crime. Funding the programs that we already know are working. And we need to make sure that, voters should be very discerning about ensuring that whoever they are electing is going to be backing these evidence-based solutions. Not one single council member can change that. Not even all of city council together can change that. It's going to take, all of our elected officials, the mayor and the council together, and everyone else, to make this happen.
So you've used the term evidence-based many times in the past few years. What does that really mean, and what's an example of not evidence-based?
One place I see this coming up recently is incarcerating drug users. So we know we have a problem with drugs in our city. And we know that the answer is not do nothing. We need to crack down on this in every way that we can. And again, with evidence-based solutions. So putting a single-use drug user, arresting them and putting them in jail overnight where they turn back out, it doesn't work. There's overwhelming evidence to say that that doesn't work, and there's overwhelming evidence to say that making sure that we have sufficient diversion treatment program, substance use treatment programs, mental and behavioral health beds and care, making sure that we have those programs funded and in place and ready to go so that if an officer arrests, they have a place to put someone where there will actually be a solution involved. Putting somebody in jail for 24 hours and turning them out doesn't work. In fact, it increases the likelihood of somebody dying. And I personally have a son who is adopted out of the foster care system, has reduced executive functioning and impulse control, and he's 15, he's starting, drugs are everywhere, he's starting to experiment with drugs. We feel oftentimes like, he could end up there. He checks a lot of boxes, and he could end up there. I want people in that situation to be, to the best of our ability, offered a path that will turn them around, not churn them out.
But in the short term, we don't have all those beds. And there's also, obviously, as you mentioned, some funding will be needed. So what do we do? How do we handle this in the short term when we have what we have right now, which is we have jails, and not so many rehab and other places?
I understand that need and desire to tourniquet the situation, and we may need to pull people in, especially people who are obviously harming other people or harming small businesses or harming, we do need a way to pull people out of society if they're causing harm to people or property. And so but we also know that our jails are understaffed. People are dying in our jails. We don't want to see someone who is arrested for a health problem end up essentially getting a death sentence because they go to King County Jail and die. And then we also, so if we're going to do that, we need to fix those problems as well, and that's going to take some time.
As a city person, how would you affect that? Because, obviously the counties are run by the county. I mean, the county's who runs the jails.
Mm-hmm. Oh, sorry. What was the question?
Well,
how would you fix that?
How would you deal with that? Because again, it's a problem that's coming into your area of interest or jurisdiction, and yet you don't have direct control over it.
I know that's going to be. I mean, we're going to need to have city and county working together, city, county, and state working together. It's a problem that we all need to put at the absolute top of our list to solve and work together to get it done. It's no one person. That's, we're going to need cooperation between levels of government and elected officials to get things done. Part of it is perhaps some of the divisiveness that we've seen on the current council, that I think just having a fresher start, some newer faces, I think we all want to see change, and I think that might help if we can have a city council that is working more collaboratively together to work with the mayor to get some of these things done.
So, are you in favor of the drug the city drug proposal as it currently exists? Then, as they're going to vote for it shortly?
I need to know what. I know there are several amendments that will be coming forward. In as much as we know we need to do something, and we need to do something urgently. So but we also need to make sure that we're doing things that work. So I will be in favor of, I would love to see the funding come through to actually set up the diversion programs that are needed, that we know work. And then, absolutely, yes, let's move forward.
Funding, of course, at the heart of many things.
Yes.
So they've been talking about, a budget crunch looming citywide. So are there some things that you think we spend too much on so that we could clear out money for things like this? Or would it just have to be a matter of additional revenue?
I think both, and is always a good way to start. We need to, look at a budget top down, which of course the budget session will be starting soon. Coming out of Amazon, one of the leadership principles at Amazon is frugality, and it says, every dollar not, every dollar wasted is a dollar not spent on customers. And we can say every dollar wasted is a dollar not spent on constituents and on our communities. And so we, of course, need to be as frugal and efficient as we possibly can with every dollar that we have, especially now that we know we're heading into a budget deficit. And we need to raise additional progressive revenue. We have some good suggestions that have come out of the recent task force that was set up to look at progressive revenue options, and I think we should consider all of them.
Back during the primary campaign, I recall, because you were one of the few people at our first forum who mentioned specifics, you mentioned a vacancy tax as a possible good idea.
Yeah, I think a vacancy tax could be promising. It has sort of the double benefit of ensuring that as much of our available housing supply is on the market, which is something we should all be concerned about. Or if you want to, for some reason, keep a unit vacant, the small vacancy tax can be put towards ensuring that we have more affordable housing.
Any other particular, you mentioned that the task force had some good ideas. Any others that you favor in particular?
Yeah, there's a capital gains tax, a 1% on top of the 7% that the state recently passed that I think could help. It would hit only a very small number of wealthy families in our state. We know that we need to lift some of the burden off of, we sort of, because we have such an upside down tax code in Washington State, we have the worst tax code in the nation, and we have the poorest among us paying the highest percentage of their wages. So we just need that to be fair in any way that we can make that more fair. We can't keep putting the burden on, I talk to a lot of homeowners who are trying to age in place, and property taxes keep going up and up and up because it's sort of our one thing that we can pile, tax increases and generate revenue on. But we can't keep doing that. We need to make sure that we're, as much as possible, sharing the burden in an equitable way. And so a capital gains tax could be one way to do that.
Going back to public safety, I asked the question, and I'm still interested in the answer. Evidence-based. What does that really mean, and what do we know is evidence-based currently?
Seattle claims to be a housing first city, but we haven't actually implemented a housing first strategy. We know that when we address homelessness and poverty, crime goes down. So it's going to be that, but it takes time to come to fruition. So, we do need to think about the tourniquet and the, longer term fixes. But there's overwhelming evidence to say that bringing people inside, bringing people in off the streets has a number of benefits that for all of us. So for one thing, our parks become our parks, our streets become our streets. We can start to see tourism return, or people feeling safe to go downtown, or whatever concerns are there. And it's also great for the people who come inside. Then we can bring the wraparound services to people where they're in a safe place with 4 walls and a door they can close and lock, whether that's their car in a safe lot, a tiny home, whatever types of emergency shelters that we can create where people get that first level of safety, and then we can start them on the right path. So whether it's their one paycheck short of making rent, or it's a mental behavioral health condition, or a substance use disorder, or a combination of those, the first place to start, and this is evidence-based solution, is bringing people inside, getting them to that stable place, and then bringing them the individualized treatment that they need, or solutions or resources or whatever it is.
Okay, not all crime is committed by homeless people, heaven knows.
Yep.
So what would you, what about there? Are you, in favor of just, what's your philosophy on enforcement, I guess, is
Right.
also a question.
Right. Yeah, and there's so many evidence-based solutions within just crime prevention, and reacting to crime. We've seen cameras being installed in places to bring some of the street racing down that we've seen that is incredibly dangerous in our neighborhoods. Speed bumps on the streets to address speed racing, which has been, I hear from a lot of voters, that's a concern. And then making sure that our officers are well staffed. We know that visibility of officers can have a measurable effect. That's evidence-based. There is evidence to say that just having visibility of a police presence, and even sometimes security presence, having uniformed security people on public transit can reduce crime, even if they aren't police officers with guns. So everywhere we can, we look at what are other cities using. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. Everybody's studying crime. Everybody's looking at the best solutions. Let's take the best from any other city that's doing that, and let's just get serious about getting it done.
Okay, before we move on to, I have at least one other topic that I wanted to ask you about. I think it's important that you again clarify the issue of what you said somewhere early in the primary campaign regarding the city council in the 50% defund phase, because that's come back up again. Your opponent has mentioned it repeatedly, and I wonder if you would say, what was it that you really said and what did you mean?
Yeah, thank you for asking that. And actually, spoke directly to Rob, and I just said, Rob, I don't want to defund the police, right? So he knows now. There was a question in a Martin Luther King Labor Council, MLK Labor Council forum, and it was one of those rapid fire questions where you just hold up a red or green card. And the question was, at the time, in 2020, was it right for the city council to defund the police? And my initial reaction was yes. And that was because at the time, more than 50% of Seattle voters were asking for that. And the nation was screaming for it. And I think it was a conversation that needed to be had. That's what we elect city council to do, is to stand up and take a bold stance when the majority of voters are demanding it. So 7 out of 9 at the time voted for that. Many of them have now thought that wasn't such a good idea. I would likely be in that same camp, because obviously it didn't work. We weren't prepared with a good plan to defund. And I don't think that our country is even ready to defund. We have far too many guns on our streets and in our country to expect that we aren't going to have that we aren't going to need armed officers. We can't be the Netherlands, where you could walk on the street with a taser or a baton as an officer and feel like you would be able to do your job. So we absolutely need a strong police force, and discussions about how we can fund alternative responses are certainly valuable, but it's a both and. We need to have armed officers and alternative response. Lead with compassion and refuse to tolerate harmful behavior.
Okay. The other topic that I wanted to make sure that we talked about today was the transportation plan that's been recently released by the SDOT. I'm wondering if you've taken a look at it and what your first thoughts are about the draft.
I haven't I haven't been able to see the draft. I actually was trying to look at that last night and the link was broken. I was so frustrated because I was like, oh my God, I'm so excited to read about this. We know that we need to have a plan that's going to work. The draft is for 20 years out. We need to have a plan that will ensure that transportation is widely available and we need to make sure we are removing any inequities in where and how we build transportation. We need to make sure that our transportation plan is going to get us towards our climate goals as a city. And we need to make sure that transit is safe, convenient, and accessible. So I would love to see where they're at. I haven't actually read the details yet, and I'm looking forward to digging into that.
One of the things that it definitely prioritizes something you mentioned, in fact, very briefly a little bit earlier about street use more for for not just for cars,
Yeah.
etc. What do you think the city's role is, regardless of whether you've seen the actual plan and the proposals? The city's role is in advancing the future, the possible alternative transportation, and whether we should move away from single occupancy vehicles and so forth.
The city plays a huge role, and we do need to move as quickly as we can away from single occupancy vehicles. Single occupancy vehicles and cars on the roads contribute to over 50% of our carbon emissions as a city. And so if we want to meet our climate goals, we have to address single-use occupancy vehicles. And getting everybody into an electric vehicle also isn't the solution, because then we still have, traffic congestion and rubber on the roads that destroys our salmon streams and et cetera. Plus, we need to prioritize electrifying, transit, public transit, and electrifying short-haul trucking, and electrifying our ports. So I would want to put the, dollars towards that versus building out necessarily the single occupancy vehicle network. So we need to, as much as we can, get people out of single occupancy cars, and that's gonna take a massive investment in public transit.
In the short run, we also have quite the infrastructure crunch. What will you be doing if you're elected to making sure that doesn't kind of get fallen by the wayside?
Mm-hmm. Right. We've all suffered, especially in West Seattle with the bridge being out, we've suffered from infrastructure problems. We need to keep prioritizing those. I will continue to, every time we upgrade in any neighborhood, we should make sure that we are also upgrading sidewalks, the ramps at the corners to make sure that wheeled people walking and rolling can easily get up onto the sidewalks, repairing potholes and bridges, making sure that as we upgrade, we're bringing the old infrastructure along with us and upgrading that as well.
So I have one more question. So if you're elected, you would be succeeding somebody who's been the first and only District 1 council person so far, and she served 8 years, Lisa Herbold. Is there anything on which you think that you differ from Ms. Herbold?
I know that we are different. I come out of big business and big tech, and I have a lot of experience managing and running big teams and big budgets, and I have also experience organizing, standing up for workers and workers' rights. I have experience, pressuring one of the biggest corporations in town and one of the richest men in the world. while I was at Amazon, pressuring Amazon to do better on climate, which they did, and which is a huge win for all of us. So I know that I can be a strong advocate for workers and working families. We need to have a city that works not just for billionaires and our biggest corporations, but works for everyone. And working families right now need a lot of support, and I would be a strong advocate for working families.
Any particular differences, though, in ideology or, things that you would have done differently?
Not off the top of my head. I mean, I would have voted I would have voted similarly on some of these recent issues. I just hope that I can be as present in our community and as responsive to our community and understanding what the needs of all of our community members are, and then be effective in making change and making the things that we all want to see happen.
All right, Maren Costa, we'll talk to you again next forum.
Thank you.